I don't know. It was a sneak attack. Russo, Archie. Those are the two I caught. I mean, my heart about jumped through my throat. It was cold now. That was fun.
It's a good start for the Owls as Rod Carey wins his first game at the helm. There's plenty to break down. Inside the Nest is live and it starts right now.
Hello everybody and welcome to the first 2019 live edition of Inside the Nest. Alongside Brooklyn Vaughn, I'm Dan Wilson and we have a packed show for you today. We'll break down Temple's entire schedule and bring you our season predictions and our favorite segment, No Huddle.
Yes, it's back.
Let's look at the Owls' historic offensive performance from Saturday's win over Bucknell.
Here we go. In the Owls' first possession, they come out swinging. Anthony Russo connects with redshirt sophomore Jaden Blue to put the Owls on the board early.
Yeah, first touchdown of Blue's career, 10 receptions, 117 yards to go along with this trip to the end zone.
And the Bison are visibly shaken up here. Quarterback Logan Bidikofer loses control of the ball and recovers it way back on the Bucknell 10-yard line. They turn it over on downs. Another commanding drive by the Owls leads them to the Bucknell 11-yard line. Jagger Gardner takes the handoff and battles his way to the end zone. Temple up 14-0 with just over 5 minutes left in the first quarter.
Gardner doubled his touchdown total from last year in this game alone, one of two Owls players with multiple trips to the house.
And check this one out. Anthony Russo loses control here with an interception. That's his only hiccup on the day so far.
Yeah, it was by Gavin Pringle with the interception. Russo had 14 interceptions last season. Got to take a look at that going forward.
Freshman Ramon Davis. If you didn't know the name before Saturday, well, you do now. Anthony Russo connects with Davis, who took it 51 yards to the house and put the Owls up 35-9 at the end of the half.
Yeah, it was a near perfect 2019 debut for Russo. The injured calf didn't look injured at all. FCS opponent or not, Russo gave plenty for opposing defensive coordinators to worry about moving forward. Owls win this one 56-12. Scoring 35 points on the Bison in week 1, and they start 1-0 for the first time since 2015.
And of course, Anthony Russo coming out, but Todd Centeo takes the reins late in the fourth. Here we go. He connects for an 89-yard touchdown with Trayvon Williams, who was wide open. He's going to go all the way. The Owls cap off their win 56-12.
A 44-point win for the Owls in week 1, huge.
You're up 14-0 quick with a 3-and-out in between. That's pretty demoralizing, and I thought that was a good thing. And then we kept that momentum going for a bit there, which was good.
I think we moved pretty well today. I think we did well getting the signals, getting lined up, and I think there was a couple times where we were ready to snap the ball, and we snapped the play, and the defense wasn't set. They were still looking over for a call. So I think for us to keep pushing that tempo was big for us. Definitely still a little bit of rush there. I missed two open touchdowns on the first drive, one Isaiah and one of Jaden Blue. So that just comes with timing, being out here on Saturdays again. Practice is one thing, but that game speed is a little bit different.
Our leaders, again, Esdod, Chappelle, Isaiah, those guys have brought me in. And Isaiah's been talking to me all week about, you're going to score, you're going to do good. Just stay level-headed and be ready.
What was going on with that? And then team presented me with the game ball, which means a lot. That will go right in the trophy case. I won't forget about that one. I don't want it to roll off right now.
Yeah, as we mentioned, Owls win by 44 points, 56-12, scoring 35 points on the Bison in the first half. Bucknell's only touchdown in the game came off that second quarter pick 6, but that was basically the only hiccup of the day for the redshirt junior QB. 32 completions, 41 attempts, 409 yards passing, and 4 touchdowns to 4 different receivers. Russo's 409 yards in the air nearly doubled Bucknell's 211 yards of total offense. Bucknell tried 3 different quarterbacks in this game, none of whom could get anything going. The only offensive player for the Bison who had a day to write home about was receiver Brandon Sanders. He had 9 receptions for 115 yards. And we had a team at this game covering the opener for you. First off, we send it over to Inside the Nest reporter Dom Gillespie, who had a look at Rod Carey's first win and Temple's historic offensive performance. Hey, Dom.
Thanks, Dan. Since 2011, Temple head coaches have struggled in their debuts. 3 out of the last 4 new head coaches lost in their debut game. Rod Carey, on the other hand, had different plans.
When it comes to week ones, history has not been kind to the Owls. Their last week 1 win coming in 2015 when they shocked Penn State. And you have to go back to 2011 and Steve Adazio to find the last time a Temple coach won in his debut.
Today we went out and won, and whether it was what we were supposed to do or whatever, winning is hard. And these guys were dialed in from the start.
All eyes were on Rod Carey's new up-tempo offense in his first game at Lincoln Financial Field. And boy, was it on display. Temple besting Bucknell by only 1 minute in time of possession, despite having 44 more points. And Bucknell didn't have any real answers.
Freshman year with Coach Rowe, we were huddled up, and then the last 2 years we were no huddle. But I've never been in something this fast paced, and I think it works to our advantage. Like I said, there was a couple times where we're snapping the ball and the defense still isn't even set.
The Owls come out in week 1 and make a statement. 56-12 is the final score against Bucknell. The Owls will now try to transition into a bye week, which head coach Rod Carey thinks has its pros and cons.
It's not ideal. You don't want to bye after your first game. In this situation, I think it's perfect because we still got some guys like Kenny Yeboah who are a little banged up, guys that are fighting to get back.
Either way, the Owls are sure to see a much different opponent in 2 weeks. No more FCS teams. Next up, it's Maryland, a team that won its first game by 79 points.
That 79-point performance was just shy of the school record. Combined, the Owls and the Terps scored 135 points in week 1. Their game in 2 weeks is bound to be a shootout. Reporting from the Plasma, I'm Dom Gillespie. Brooklyn and Dan, back to you guys.
Thanks, Dom. Unfortunately, it's time to take our first break of the semester.
Up next, it's going to get harder. We'll break down Temple's 2019 schedule. We'll be back in 90 seconds. Welcome back to Inside the Nest. A variety of streaks and records were broken on Saturday, starting with the Owls' new head coach. Rod Carey is the first Temple coach to win his debut since Steve Adazio in 2011, making him only the second of the last 5 Owls head coaches to win their first game. Additionally, the Owls' 695 yards of total offense was a program record, topping the 670 yards they put up against UCF last season, as mentioned by Ryan Wallen of Owls Daily 24/7. Now take a look at this tweet from Kyle Gauss at owlscoop.com. Freshman running back Ramon Davis was huge against Bucknell with both a rushing and receiving touchdown. The only other freshman in the entire country to do that in week 1 was Colorado State receiver Dante Wright. Davis was truly a jack of all trades on Saturday, rushing for 60 yards while also piling up 78 yards on the receiving end. The Owls got through week 1 without any injuries that will affect their depth chart in 2 weeks against Maryland. However, cornerback Ty Mason will be ineligible for the first half in that game due to a targeting penalty during the second half.
The Owls put together a complete game to kick off their 2019 campaign. An historic day from the offense and a stout performance from the defense equaled a 44-point win, and quarterback Anthony Russo led the charge. Just days before the season opener, Rod Carey, remember, he was still unsure about his starting quarterback's calf injury. He was a proven healthy Russo. He got the nod, and it paid off for the Owls. He threw for more than 400 yards for only the second time in his career en route to a near-perfect 94.6 QBR. Each of Russo's 4 touchdown passes went to different Owls receivers, and throughout the game, the redshirt junior spread the ball to 7 different Temple pass catchers. Russo finished his day averaging 10 yards per pass attempt through 3 quarters of play. By the way, he also rushed the ball 4 times himself, so that's another clear indication that calf injury was good to go.
There were a lot of question marks of how the Owls' rushing attack would fare with the loss of Raquel Armstead. Carey put that conversation to, at least very temporarily, a rest on Saturday with a running back duo of Ramon Davis and Jagger Gardner, who combined for 114 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground, while averaging 6 yards per rush. Davis also proved himself effective as a receiver, adding 78 yards of receiving yards and another touchdown.
And Temple's historic day on offense is, of course, thanks in part to the team's 3rd down efficiency. Bucknell's defense had 15 attempts to get the Owls' offense off the field, but they failed to do so on 11 of those attempts. With a mix of passing and rushing, Temple kept Bucknell's defense guessing and was able to generate big plays that led to big scores. The Owls offense outsnapped the Bison 82-63 despite only winning the time of possession battle by a minute. Temple's offense averaged 8.5 yards in play in Saturday's 44-point win.
Not much to complain about the rushing defense if you're a Temple fan. Owls allowed just 21 yards on the ground on Saturday. This was a team that was second in the AAC in rushing yards allowed per attempt last season at 4.1. On Saturday, the Bison gained just 0.8 yards per play from scrimmage. With key players returning from last year's front seven, this is definitely a strength the Owls will need to play to again this year if they want to have success.
And we now go from Bucknell to Temple's entire season. Here we go with one win under their belt. The Owls now head into their bye week.
Yeah, nothing ideal about this early bye, but they will have 2 weeks to get ready for a Big Ten opponent in Maryland who scored 79 points in week 1. You think Temple dropped a lot, as you mentioned, 79-0 over Howard University last week, as we mentioned earlier in the show. Looking ahead, a week later, the Owls will take on a school you may remember from its days in the MAC. It's the Buffalo Bulls. That may sound like an easier game than Maryland, but this Buffalo team came into the Link in week 2 last season and beat the Owls by a touchdown.
And of course, the highly anticipated return of former Temple head coach Jeff Collins. September 28th at the Link, it'll be the first matchup in Temple's home-and-home series with Georgia Tech. The Yellow Jackets they're set to host Temple at Bobby Dodd Stadium on September 20th, 2025. Dan, can you mark your calendar 6 years in advance? I don't know. Back to 2019, the Owls will then head down to Greenville, North Carolina to take on the ECU Pirates October 3rd. It's a Thursday night game for their kickoff. First matchup of the season against a conference opponent.
Definitely marking my calendar in 2025, but Temple then plays host to Memphis back in 2019 for its first matchup against Memphis since 2016. The last time the Owls beat Memphis, that was during the Tigers' last trip to the Link in 2015. The Tigers are the current betting favorite to win the AAC West. And speaking of the AAC West, the Owls then travel to Dallas, Texas to face the SMU Mustangs.
And the UCF Knights come to town on October 26th. It's sure to be the Owls' biggest test of the season. And of course, the Knights now have former Notre Dame quarterback Brandon Wimbush, who transferred down to Orlando to fill in for the injured Mackenzie Milton. And the Owls will then head down to Tampa, Florida on November 7th to take on the USF Bulls. Temple has not won at South Florida in the last 2 games that they've played down at Raymond James Stadium since the Bulls joined the conference back in 2013.
Temple then travels back to the Link to face off against its final AAC West opponent of the year in the Tulane Green Wave, before heading back on the road for a matchup against Cincinnati. The Owls' last trip to Cincinnati was in 2017, where Temple finished on top by a score of 35-24.
Yeah, in that last game of the regular season, Temple will host the Huskies at home on November 30th, Thanksgiving weekend. Last season, if you can think back, Temple defeated UConn that blowout win 57-7.
Now it's time to take another break, but don't go anywhere.
When we come back, we're going no huddle for the first time in 2019, and this will include our season predictions. It's time to bring back one of our favorite segments in the show, No Huddle. 6 minutes, 6 topics, and here we go.
Brooklyn, as you saw, they used Sean Bradley as all AAC line. Keep doing in 2019?
You know what? If he wants to run the ball, let him run the ball. But if you ask me, I'm going to say no. Just out of concern of injuries, let's reduce the injury risk, in my opinion. Of course, you have running backs Ramon Davis and Jagger Gardner holding it down on the offensive front. Don't go ahead and put Sean in there if you don't need him.
Yeah, I get it. Look, you're trying to replace Raquel Armstead from a season ago. But as you mentioned, Jagger Gardner, Ramon Davis, they were studs on Saturday against Bucknell. This is not something that they need to keep pursuing. Last year, they used Freddie Booth-Lloyd in a couple of situations, generally on the goal line. He was a big dude, but they don't need to use Sean Bradley as an extensive running back. It was for one little drive. I don't expect this to be something that we continue to see through the course of the season. It's just not, it doesn't make sense to have one of your best defensive players playing on the offensive side of the ball if you don't need him to. Now, we could moving on here, I should say, to the second question of No Huddle. If you want the Owls to keep scoring a lot of touchdowns, do you like the new tradition that they had on Saturday, ringing the Liberty Bell? A lot of teams do it in Philly. What's your take, Brooklyn?
Just like you said, Dan, a lot of teams do it. Let's be original, Temple. Let's think of something cooler. The Phillies are doing it. The Sixers are doing it. I mean, hey, it's nice. It's a good way to celebrate. We had Ben Franklin out there ringing the bell, Hooter ringing the bell. But like I said, let's get a little original.
Oh, come on. Do you hate Philadelphia?
No, kill that rhetoric.
No, ringing the bell is a great Philadelphia tradition. It goes all the way back to 1776, the old days of Veterans Stadium. The Eagles had it. The Phillies do it on every single home run. Bryce Harper doesn't need to be the only guy ringing the bell in Philly. It can also be Ramon Davis. It can be Brandon Mack. It can be Jagger Gardner. This is a great tradition. They got Ben Franklin down on the sideline, and you want to kill it. Totally ridiculous.
Hey, all fairness. Now let's talk single digits. Obviously super prestigious out here at Temple. Who's your pick single digit player of the year?
It's the guy I just mentioned, Brandon Mack. This guy was a stud last year. 601 yards. Did you know that was second behind only Ventel Bryant? That's the guy whose number he took, by the way. This guy is a human highlight machine. He's going to be on some NFL draft boards by the end of the season. He knows how to find the ball. He knows how to get to the end zone. He has chemistry with Anthony Russo in year 2. It's basically year 2 for him after a breakout season in 2019. There's no reason to believe he won't be the offensive single digit of the year in total. It's his award to lose, basically.
Sure, Dan, but I'm going to go with Isaiah Wright. To me, it's a no-brainer. This guy, every time he touches a ball, he's a threat. He excels receiving, rushing, and returning fronts. I'm going to go with him for this one. He's versatile, and that's why he was named to the prestigious Horning Award watch list. So keep an eye on him. He was the AAC Special Teams Player of the Year last year, so he's coming in with the same energy this year. I cannot wait to see what he does for the Owls.
Okay, Brooklyn. So next question here on No Huddle. We're going to open it up to all players, but just on the offensive side of the ball. Who is your offensive player to watch, and who will be the Offensive Player of the Year when all is said and done for the 2019 Owls?
I'm going with Anthony Russo here, Dan. His decision-making, you brought this up before, 14 picks and 14 touchdowns last year. Not a great ratio, but it is year 2. He did look fine with the calf injury coming into his season debut. He's currently ranked 22nd by College Football Focus. He definitely set the tone in his season opener, and I'm excited to see what he does on the offensive front.
Yeah, this is a guy, as you mentioned, the decision-making is the big thing for me. He had a bad interception against Bucknell, but the calf did not appear to be an issue as he wasn't practicing up leading to week 1. He looks good. It's year 2 for him. College Football Focus coming into the year, 22nd quarterback in the entire country. This Temple Owls team will go as Anthony Russo goes. He's the general. He's under a new head coach. You heard him allude to it in the post-game press conference. He likes working with the new Rod Carey system. He likes working up-tempo. This is not just a fluke because it was against Bucknell. He will have sustained success throughout the entire season. And now moving to the defensive side of the ball, who's your pick there? I'm
going to go senior linebacker Sean Bradley. He is entering this season as the clear-cut team's defensive leader, in my opinion. 169 tackles, averaging over 80 a season. He's hungry. He is ready to show out on defense this year.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the same pick. I like what you said, linebacker Sean Bradley. He doesn't need to do any more on the running back side of the ball. This guy was the first team AAC defense a year ago. This guy is probably the best player, or arguably at least, the best player at his position on the entire roster. This guy had, I believe, 169 tackles a season ago. He knows how to find the ball. He's all over the field. He played a good game the other day. Not talking about rushing the ball, obviously. I'm talking about on the defensive end. This guy is a stud, and he will be the Defensive Player of the Year in 2019.
All right, Dan, 1 win under their belt. What are you thinking? How is their season going to shape up? Record prediction?
Yeah, record predictions are never easy. You don't know how injuries are going to go. You don't know. Teams change and fluctuate like no other sport, basically, from week to week. But I'll go with 7-5. Look, they're under a new head coach. Don't want to get too overly optimistic. This is a team that's still poised to go to a bowl game. Anthony Russo in year 2, Brandon Mack in year 2, bringing a lot of players back in the front 7. But they have a tougher schedule. You mentioned playing Memphis for the first time since 2016, which they haven't played. And they're projected to win the AAC West. They have Maryland coming up in 2 weeks. They have Cincinnati, UCF. These are all tough opponents. You just have to imagine that 7 wins is going to be somewhere in that ballpark.
Hey, I'm going to go with 8-4. I think the Owls are capable of pulling off at least 8 wins this year. Maybe a couple upsets in there, but Dan, like you said, Georgia Tech, that game's personal. We'll see how they perform against Jeff Collins' Yellow Jackets. Of course, Maryland coming up, their next face-off. I'm also seeing a tough team, UCF. Even though that quarterback situation was up in the air, seems like they're getting in the groove now with their replacement. So we will see. It'll be a battle of the quarterbacks there. Hey, let's see what the season holds.
Yeah, I'm just glad you mentioned Georgia Tech. That's going to be a game the Owls players definitely get up for, playing against their old coach. They took a beating against Clemson in week 1. Obviously a little bit of a tougher opponent than the Owls had, but that should be a good one, a tough opponent at the Link nonetheless. We have to go to another break. 6 minutes of no huddle. We're a little gassed, but when we come back, we're going to throw some history your way. 1927 to 1970, Temple and Bucknell played each other annually in the Old Shoe rivalry. Inside the Nest reporter Ray Dunn caught up with former Temple players who played in the annual rivalry. Hey, Ray.
That's right, Dan. For nearly half a century, a once great rivalry has been dormant. I caught up with former players Joe Morelli and Jerry Prosciutti, who waited a long time to see the past revisit Temple football.
On a Saturday of new beginnings, Temple football turned back the clock against an old rival. Bucknell is actually Temple's most common opponent, thanks in part to a 44-season-long rivalry from 1927 to 1970.
It was a rivalry that was established by the dean of the dental school, who I believe was a Bucknell grad, and he became dean of the Temple Dental School, and he was an avid football fan.
This series featured the first ever regularly scheduled night football game in 1930, as well as some of the biggest Middle Atlantic Conference matchups of the 1960s.
It was a great rivalry. We always wanted to beat them, you know, and we knew that we were always looking forward to that game because it was, I guess, one of our greatest rivalries.
It was always an intense rivalry, no matter what, even coaching against them. I mean, we had some good success.
When the two teams met up annually, they played for the Old Shoe Trophy, with the winner holding onto the trophy until the next matchup. The design of the trophy came in the 1940s as a tribute to those who served and lost their lives in World War II.
Well, it was always a big rivalry because of the Old Shoe, and it was always very intense, very tough game.
Despite Temple's easy win on Saturday, Bucknell still holds a 20, 17, and 8 all-time record versus the Owls. With no future games scheduled between the two, the Bison can hold on to that distinction. Regardless, the Owls can say that the Old Shoe still fits perfectly in Edberg Olson Hall. Temple's 44-point win on Saturday was not their largest margin of victory over Bucknell. That came in 1966 when the Owls beat the Bison 82-28. That win ended Temple's 12-game losing streak against Bucknell. Reporting from Plasma, Dan in Brooklyn, back to you.
Thank you, Ray. And props to you for undercovering that old footage. That could not have been easy to find, I'm sure.
Of course, it is that time of year again. Fall sports are in full swing here at Temple, and OwlSports Update is back. Tune in Thursday at noon for a new anchor duo coming at you live. Sean McGeehan and Brian Steinmetz. They'll be there keeping you up to date with all things Temple athletics. And of course, don't forget to follow us on all of our social media platforms. You can find us Instagram, Twitter at OwlSports Update.
Yeah, certainly plenty going on, even though it is a Temple football bye week. That's a wrap for the first live edition of Inside the Nest. For Brooklyn Vaughn, I'm Dan Wilson. Have a great week, everybody.
We'll see you next Tuesday at noon.